Welcome back, guys. Hi, guys, how are you? Let's go back straightly into the chapter. It's chapter 9 Helpful Disclosures. Nancy watched Abby Rowan intently as the mantel clock finished striking. The elderly woman's lips has begun to move. The clock, she whispered. That's what's it, the clock. Nancy gripped the arms of her chair in excitement. Joshua Crowley hit the bill in a clock, she prompted. No, no, it wasn't that, Abby murmured, sighed again. I know Joshua said something about a clock, but whatever it was has slipped my mind. Silence descended over the room. Nancy was wondering what connection the timepiece could have with the missing will. Mrs. Rowan was staring at the clock, evidently still trying to probe her memory. Suddenly she gave a low cry. There, it came to me just like that. What, Mrs. Rowan? Nancy urged quietly, lest she startle the old woman with forgetfulness. A notebook, Abby explained sympathetically. Nancy's heart gave a leap, but she forced herself to say calmly, Please tell me more about this notebook. Well, one day, not long before he passed away, Joshua said to me, Abby, after I'm dead, if my last will isn't found, you can learn about it in this little notebook of mine. Do you know what become of the notebook, Mrs. Roman? Oh, dearest me, there goes my memories again. No, I don't. Although baffled, Nancy felt a grounding conviction that was the whereabouts of the Crowley will was definitely tied up with a clock of some kind. But she pondered, why did the striking of the mantel clock remind Amy Rowans of the notebook? Impulsively, Nancy got up and went out to the mantel. She looked inside the glass front and in the back. There was no papers inside. Returning to her chair, Nancy asked the elderly woman, What became of the furnishing of the Crowley's home when he gave it up? The Tophams got most everything. There must have been a family clock, Nancy mused half to herself. A family clock? Abby repeated. Oh, yes, there was a clock. Can you describe it? It was just an ordinary mantel time, something like mine, tall with a square face, the women told Nancy. Only Joshua was fancier. Had some kind of a moon on top. What became of the clock? Nancy questioned. I suppose the Tophams got it too. At last, Nancy, sure she had done all she could from Abby and that she had learned as much as possible from the peasant, rose to depart. After saying goodbye, she stopped at a neighboring house and asked the occupants to live in occasionally on the ailing women. I think maybe one of the country's visiting nurses should be see Mrs. Rowans, she suggested. I'll phone the agency, the neighborhood offered. Meanwhile, I'll go over myself. I'm so sorry I didn't know about Mrs. Rowan. As Nancy drove towards River Heights, she jubilantly reviewed the new facts in the case. Now, if I can only locate Mr. Crawley's notebook or clock or both. Nancy brow knit in concentration. How about she go tracking down the old timepiece? I guess, she concluded, if the Tophams do have the clock, I'll have to pay them a visit. While she did not relish the idea of calling on the unpleasant family, Nancy was determined to pursue every possible clue. I can just see Ada and Isabella's expression when I appear at their front door, Nancy thought wryly. Well, I'll think of some excuses to see them. She was still mulling over the problem when she pulled into the driveway of her home and heard a familiar voice calling her name. Why, Helen Corling, explained Nancy, as a slim, attractive school friend of hers ran up. I haven't seen you for days. I've been busy lately, Helen explained, trying to sell 6 tickets for a charity ball, but I haven't had much luck. Would you like a couple? A sudden idea flashed in Nancy's mind as her friend's words. Helen, she said excitedly, I'll buy 2 of your tickets and sell the rest for you. The other girl started in astonishment. Why, that's a wonderful offer, Nancy, but Nancy's eyes danced. I know you think I've lost my mind. I really mean it, though. Please let me take the tickets. I can't tell you my reasons yet, except my case is a worthy one. Helen, looking relieved but beloved, handed over the tickets. This is really a break for me, she said. Now I can leave for my aunt's camp, Avondale, this evening, as I would hope. It's as a moon lake. I thought I'd never get off with those tickets unsold. Nancy smiled. Have a grand time, Helen, she said. How about coming along? It's not expensive and there's a room for a lot of more girls. We have loads of fun. I would love to, Nancy replied, but right now I can't get away. Maybe you can make it later, Helen suggested. If so, just zip on up. I'll be there for 2 weeks before the regular summer camp opens. The two friends chatted a little longer, then said goodbye. Nancy put the car away, then walked slowly towards the house, looking immediately at the charity tickets in her hand. There are to be my passports to the Dauphin stronghold. It was the following afternoon when Nancy approached the large, pretentious house belonging to the Dauphins. Bracing herself for what she realized would be a trying interview, Nancy mounted the steps and rang the bell. Here goes, she thought. I must be subtle in the maneuver to keep from arousing the Dauphin's suspicions. At that moment, a maid opened the door and, with a concerning look, waited for Nancy to state her mission. Will you please tell Mrs. Dauphin that Nancy Drew is calling? She requested. I am selling tickets for a charity dance. It's one of the most important functions of the year in River Heights, Nancy added impressively. It seemed ages to the young slit before the maid returned and said that, Madam, would you see her? Nancy was ushered into the living room, which was so bizarre in its decor she was startled. Such an example hodgepodge. Nancy observed to herself sitting down. She glanced at the pink carpet, which to her clashed with the red window, and at an indiscriminate assortment of period furnitures mixed with modern. A haughty noise interrupted her thoughts. Well, what do you want, Nancy? Mrs. Dauphin had sailed grandly into the room and seated herself opposite to Nancy. I'm selling, Nancy began pleasantly. Oh, if you're selling things, I'm not interested, the woman broke it rudely. I can't be handing out money to every solitaire who's coming along. With difficulty, Nanny suppressed an anger resort to the cutting remark. Mrs. Dauphin, she said evenly, perhaps your maid didn't make it clear. I'm selling tickets to a charity ball, which will be one of the loveliest affairs in River Heights this year. Oh, a slight change came over Mrs. Dauphin's face. Nancy sensed that her words had struck a responsive chord. The woman was well known for her aspirations to be accepted by the best families in River Heights. Well, to Nancy's dismay, Mrs. Dauphin's response was cut off by the arrival of Ada and Isabella. The sisters entered the room, but did not notice Nancy's presence. They were intensely carrying a disgruntled conversation. Really? Ada was complaining. I am positive that woman snapped up deliberately. Then she and Isabella caught sight of Nancy and stopped short. They started coldly at the visitor. What are you doing here? Isabella asked with a patronizing air. Mrs. Dauphin answered her daughter's question. Nancy is selling tickets to a charity dance, dear. It's to be a very important affair, and I think it'll be very beneficial for us to be present. Isabella tossed her head disdainfully. Don't waste your money, mother. Isabella's right, Ada chimed in. We don't want to go to a ball, just anybody can go to. We only attend the most exclusive affairs. Absolutely, Isabella declared in her haughtiest tone. After all, Ada and I are very particular about the people we close to meet. Mrs. Dauphin hesitated, evidently influenced by the daughter's argument. Nancy's heart sank, and she feared her cause was lost. She fully realized that Ada and Isabella would stay away from the dance just to spite her. As she debated what her next move should be, Richard Dauphin walked into the living room. He was a thin man with sprays graying hair. His manners were rather nervous. Mrs. Dauphin professionally introduced Nancy to her husband. I gather you have some tickets to dispose of, Miss Drew, he said with ceremony. How many? 5? 4? Nancy replied in some surprise. I'll take them all. Mrs. Dauphin opened his wallet with a flourish and drew out $100 bill. Here you are. Keep the change for your charity. His daughters gasped and his wife exclaimed, Richard, have you lost your sense? All that money? Listen, Mr. Dauphin reported bluntly. This donation will entitle us to have our names on the programs as patrons. With this remark, he slumped into a chair and buried himself in the financial section of the newspaper. His family stared at one another, but they knew that the matter was closed. They never dared disturb him, and he was absorbed in the stock market reports. Nancy arose reluctantly. She still has some accomplished the real purpose of her visit, but she had no excuse for prolonging her stay. How could she find out about the Crawley's clock? Was it one on the mantelpiece? I must be going, she said. Then looking at her wristwatch, she pretended that it had stopped and began to wind it. What time is it, please? There's a clock right in front of you, on the mantel, Ada said sharply. Nancy looked at the timepiece. So that's it, she remarked casually. Is it an here room, perhaps the whole Crawley clock I've heard so much about? Mrs. Dauphin looked down her nose. I should say not. This is a far more expensive one. Isabella also rose to Nancy's plate. Cousin Josiah's old clock was a monetary. We wouldn't even have it cluttering up the attic. Nancy's hope wanted. But she asked quickly, "Oh, then you sold it?" "No," Ada spoke up contemptuously. "Who would give any money for the piece of junk? We sent it up to our bungalow at Loon Lake." Moon Lake? The words hit Nancy like a thunderbolt. Not only had the Topham girl given Nancy the very information she thought, but Helen's coming invitation to the camp at Berlin provided a valid reason to visit the resort. Now, if she could only figure out how to see the old clock. As if Ada had read the visitor's thoughts, she said airily, "We have some real fine pieces up at the cottage, Nancy. If you ever get up that way, drop in to see them. The caretaker will show you around." "Thank you. Thank you so much for everything," Nancy said, trying hard to conceal her excitement. As the door closed behind her, Nancy grinned in anticipation. "What luck," she told herself. "Moon Lake, here I come." Wow. Let's stay tuned for the next chapter. Have a happy day, guys.